God damn it, bro. We was feeling so good yesterday, man. Hold on a second. I'm not recording this whole video on Snapchat. Give me a second. Okay, that's better. Listen, I was happy yesterday. The Miami Heat beat the Detroit Pistons, and yes, I know that it was a close game, but it did put the Miami Heat a season high 9 games over 500. But then within minutes of that final buzzer sound, and I was over here recording the post game, make sure y'all go check it out. I saw that little Tweety bird. I saw it, and I saw a tweet from the basement Barry who said Josh Richardson will be having shoulder surgery tomorrow and is out for the season. The man just had to sneak that in there. I love you, Barry Jackson, but I love my sleep too. How am I supposed to sleep at night knowing the guy Jay Rich, Rook number 2, is going to miss the rest of the season? Oh, that was a real gut punch for the Miami Heat and for us Heat fans as a whole, because of course Josh Richardson has been a fan favorite for a long time, and I know he left a sour taste in some Heat fans' mouths this year. That's not something I really understood, but at least of late, he really seemed like he was finally starting to get into rhythm, and he seemed like he was going to be a really nice piece to add some guard depth to this team. Now, I personally thought that Josh Richardson was having a nice season. He was averaging 10 points per game, 44% shooting from the field, and 35% shooting from 3. I know those numbers aren't the best. They're probably average at best, but he was doing all of that while providing some really solid defense. But the reason that I think he was having a pretty good season is relative to his contract, right? The guy was getting paid a minimum contract. And anytime you have a guy on a minimum deal that's giving you better production than Dwayne Dedmon and Cody Zeller, remember those guys? Those guys were bums, and they sucked relative to their contract, and they were barely getting paid too. But to have a guy like Josh Richardson averaging 10 points per game on, again, decent enough efficiency and playing defense, I think that's the best that you could possibly ask for. And he's pretty good for the vibes, right? Obviously, he was really good friends with Bam Adebayo, and he seems just to be a great locker room guy in general. You really haven't heard anybody say anything negative about him. And I do know that earlier in the season, he did get off to maybe a slower shooting start. But again, like I was saying earlier, as of late, before the injury, he was actually playing pretty well.
Hey, it's me, Pat Riley. And I've woken up from my slumber because I realized you didn't like the video and subscribe yet. So make sure to do that for me so I can get some rest. Thank you.
And I do think what he was providing was actually kind of important to the team, because after losing Gabe Vincent, you obviously lost a lot of that perimeter of attack defense. And I think Josh Richardson was a guy that was able to come in and help supplement a lot of that. Obviously, you're still looking at Caleb Martin and, of course, Jimmy and Bam as guys that can do that. But Jay Rich was a guy that was very well at that as well. And it's not like he was just standing on the three-point line shooting. He could get to the mid-range a little bit and was scoring relatively efficient from that area also. Now, first and foremost, you pray for your boy to have a speedy recovery. I know he's in pain right now. I think somebody tweeted at him like a couple days ago and said, "How's the shoulder?" And he just sent back something like, "It hurts." So you know he's not doing so great right now. But hopefully the surgery goes well. And then I guess usually when a guy gets surgery, they always say it was successful, right? When have they ever said it's not successful? I guess like Victor Oladipo, probably, right? When he tore the same quad twice. Or I guess Alex Smith on the what was he on the Commanders back then? Yeah, that was pretty brutal. But anyways, you assume everything's going to go well with Jay Rich in the surgery, and then hopefully he can start his recovery process, and he likely will be back next year because he does have a $3 million player option, which he'll probably accept. He's only going to be 31 years old, so he could test free agency if he wants to, or maybe he opts out and re-signs with the Miami Heat for more years, because we do know that he actually turned down more money from other teams because he wanted to be with the Miami Heat. I think his market, unfortunately, is probably about as low as it was last time, so I could see him returning to the Heat, whether it's with that player option or re-signing for another 2 or 3 years. And of course, I wish him the best, and I think he was a pretty important piece, as I was saying, but it's not the most critical piece, mostly just because this team is very deep, right? That's not a slight on Josh Richardson. Since the Heat got Terry Rozier, they were really only fully healthy for a few games, and in those games, Richardson was barely cracking 20 minutes a night, if that. I actually remember he even got a DNP coach's decision versus the Knicks, so I'm not entirely sure if he would even be playing, like if he'd have a solidified spot in the rotation once everyone is healthy. And again, that's a big if, because even going into the game tomorrow night versus the Mavericks, Kevin Love is already not traveling. Tyler Hero is also out. So I'm not sure if this team will ever be healthy. And of course, now that Jay Rich is out, they never really will be. But if they were, hypothetically, I'm not sure how big his role actually would be. And then, of course, on top of that, we got to talk about the couple of guys that they brought in. So as everyone knows, the Miami Heat brought in Delon Wright just, a couple weeks ago now from the buyout market after he was bought out from the Washington Wizards. He's something that most Heat fans were excited about, like one of the rare things Heat fans were actually able to agree on. Now, I think he's only played like 2 games since. He had that one game where he had to start, whether it was versus the Kings where everyone was suspended. I think that might have been it. I don't remember, but he was pretty good, right? And we know what he brings to the team. He is that guy that can be your point of attack defender. He's very good on that perimeter. Definitely better than Josh Richardson in that area. So I know we talked about losing Gabe Vincent and Jay Rich was to help make up for that. Well, if and when the Heat do need to guard other perimeter players, Delon Wright will be there. Now, I will say back in the day, Jay Rich was very good on that side of the ball, but now that he's on the wrong side of 30, he's not as good as he once was. But Delon Wright, even at the same age, I believe, as Josh Richardson, he is elite at that. And when you're talking about going into the playoffs against Damian Lillard or Jalen Brunson or all the guards that the Celtics have, it will be critical to have a guy like Delon Wright, even if you have to play the Hawks and God forbid a play-in tournament. Let's say the Heat stay in that, well, I think the Heat are 5 right now or 6, but let's say they fall into that 7 or 8 range and have to get matched up versus the Hawks. Now you got Delon Wright to play against his former team, right? And maybe help play a lot of defense on Trae Young, because back when the Heat played the Hawks, a lot of your primary defenders back then was Gabe Vincent and was PJ Tucker. And of course, those are 2 guys that you don't have anymore. And if you also remember that series, Delon Wright was clamping up Tyler Hero. I'm not going to lie to you. So it will be nice to kind of have Delon Wright on our side this time. And in that game versus the Kings, he was very good on ball as well. Hit a couple threes, was able to run the offense a little bit. You know, he's not a guy that's going to be a huge, assist guy. But I think he did like having an assist to turnover ratio this year of like 4-1, which is very, very good. And theoretically, he may be a better player than Josh Richardson. And then the other guy we got to talk about is Patty Mills, who the Heat just signed like yesterday. I dropped like an instant reaction video to it. I had to go to my car at work because I was excited about it. A lot of Heat fans were, but there was also a lot of Heat fans that weren't excited about Patty Mills because they said, hey, is this guy even going to play? What's the point? And no, he's likely not going to play. But any guy that you sign last minute on the buyout market like that is probably not going to play. But Patty Mills, if he does play, I think he's still a decent player at 35 years old. Phenomenal shooter, 39% for his career, a high assist, low turnover guy, obviously very smart. But in the locker room is where I think he will provide a lot of value. The guy is an NBA champion, one of the best leaders in the league, won like the Teammate of the Year award just last year or the year before that, and just generally known as a nice guy who is also a great leader. And obviously this team has those. You got Kevin Love, who we've heard his impact in the locker room has been great. You have Jimmy Butler. You have Eric Spoelstra. I know Udonis Haslem's not in the locker room every day anymore, but I'd like to believe that he's still involved a lot. Well, we know he is. We see him at the games all the time. But just having another guy like Patty Mills, I does think goes a long way. And when you inevitably do have some more injuries as you get closer to the playoffs and maybe in the playoffs, Patty Mills is a guy that you can rely on. He's been there before and he's not going to mess up what you have going on. And I think he's a piece that could pretty easily plug in and fit a very valuable role on this team. He might even need to come in. Let's say there's some times in the playoffs where the offense gets bogged down and you need someone who can run an offense. Patty Mills is that veteran guy that could do it. We used to say that about Kyle Lowry. Whether you believed he could or not, that's a different story. But he's not here anymore. So now you have Patty Mills that can kind of provide a lot of those same things. Some things that I wanted from Goran Dragic. They didn't want to bring him back, but Patty Mills is 2 years younger than Dragic. And at their age, that kind of is a big difference. So now we just talked about Delon Wright and Patty Mills and what they could bring to the team. But truthfully, both of those points may be irrelevant. Because the Miami Heat just played the Detroit Pistons yesterday. They had no Tyler Hero. And Delon Wright still couldn't crack the rotation. No, I don't want to say couldn't crack the rotation. It's not like he wasn't good enough, but Spoelstra just didn't necessarily find a need for him. So I'm not sure that either one of those guys would have played a lot, just like I'm not sure that Josh Richardson would have played a lot either. Now, there will be times where you will need those guys. We talked about Delon Wright if you're playing one of the better guards in the playoffs, and we talked about Patty Mills if there's injuries or you just need a reliable guy who could play right now. But if everything is healthy, if Spoelstra has all of the pieces that he wants, I'm not sure we're going to see either one of those guys too often. So that begs the question, well, what is the Miami Heat's guard rotation? Now, this is not going to become a Tyler Hero, should he start, should he come off the bench video. Even Barry Jackson put out a tweet saying something like, we know there's no way that you could bench Tyler Hero, but the Heat kind of should. And he basically said all that by saying how amazing Duncan Robinson is in the starting lineup. Y'all know my opinion. I love Tyler Hero. He's a great player. But Duncan Robinson should be in that starting lineup next to Terry Rozier, preferably. But, you know, you could swap him and Tyler either way. But if you want to just talk about the rotations in general, and this is not going to be a whole video about rotations because I can make a whole, 20-minute length podcast on that. And I will as they start to get healthy and we get closer to the playoffs in April. But let's say we want to talk about the playoffs and Spoelstra plays 8 guys, right? Well, let's count the locks in the rotation that have to play, right? You got Terry Rozier, Tyler Hero, Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo. Those are arguably your 4 best players. You know they're going to play. On top of that, do we count Nikola Jovic? He's been the starting 4 for the last week or 2 now. He's played very well. And most importantly, they've been winning. So you think Spoelstra will keep him in the rotation, but it's tough to say because earlier in the year, he wasn't playing. But if you want to go based off the way things have been lately, we'll count Nikola Jovic. That's 5. He has to play Jaime Jaquez then. Jaquez has been playing like 30 minutes a night. He was playing the entire 4th quarters for a large stretch of the season, and he's pretty awesome. A little bit older, a little bit more reliable. I think he's a lock in the rotation. You got to count Caleb Martin. He's obviously does great things on both sides of the ball and has been playing very well lately as well. And then, of course, you got to count Duncan Robinson, who's been amazing this year. I know y'all seen the professor double behind the back move he had on the Sir Thompson. He's obviously having an incredible year. So that's 8 guys right there. And that doesn't include Kevin Love, who's been out with injury, who's really the only backup big man that I think I said. You haven't included Haywood Highsmith, who played a lot of the season at the starting 4. I wouldn't consider him a backup big, but if you want to call him a backup 4, fine. So where does Spoelstra get it down to 8 or 9 guys? It's going to be almost an impossible decision. I pulled up the roster right here just because I don't want to forget anybody because they got so many pieces. I mean, Bam is obviously a lock. Like we said, Jimmy's a lock and Tyler, but you got Thomas Robinson. He probably won't play, but you might need some size. So does Orlando Robinson? Does he get any playoff run either? I don't know. Who else did we not talk about here? Of course, we didn't mention Patty Mills or Delon Wright, 2 guys who I think are certainly good enough to get into the rotation. So point is, just by looking at this roster real quick, they easily have 10 or 11 guys that are capable of playing. Problem is, if you play your 8 best guys, you got no size, and that goes back to a whole issue in the offseason with roster construction where they should have focused on getting someone who is actually big, but they didn't. So we got to deal with who we got with now. So if you want to look at the guards, though, I would say that Terry Rozier, Tyler Hero, and Duncan Robinson, those have to be your locks. Outside of that, I can't guarantee anyone. So that means that guys like Delon Wright and Patty Mills may not play anyway. So it's possible that this whole video was pointless, but I still wanted to get it out because knowing Spoelstra, there's going to be a time where Delon Wright checks into the game in Game 7 versus Celtics in the 2nd round. And he's going to play 40 minutes and probably drop a 30-point triple-double. Knowing Spoelstra. That's the great thing about this system, right? And this coaching staff. Because the guys they bring in are guys that, Udonis Haslem, one of my favorite quotes he ever said, is guys that stay ready so they don't have to get ready. That's what this team preaches, and they like that because they know that when you need a guy, when his name is called, he will be relied upon, and he will deliver. And that's one of my favorite things about this team, and I think in the playoffs, that's very important because you got other teams trying to game plan and trying to do matchups and stuff, and when you got the Heat throwing in guys who haven't played in weeks, because they have the depth for that, That's what I think does go a long way in the playoffs. A lot of times people say that stars is what wins in the playoffs, and yes, it's true. A lot of times the team that has the better player wins, but I do think that depth is severely underrated when it comes to playoff time because all these guys' bodies are banged up. They're all hurt. And when you have that many guys, it's hard to game plan because you only have a set amount of time in the playoffs. You got a game every other day. When you win a series, you got a next one sometimes 2 days later, and it's hard to game plan in the playoffs. And when the Heat have this much depth and they got a coach that's as good as game planning as he is, I think that's where the Heat will really thrive in the playoffs. Anyways, I've been talking a lot this video, just kind of talking off the dome here because I got so many thoughts. So I want to hear what y'all have to say down below. Let me know if you like the Patty Mills pickup. Let me know if you think him or Delon Wright will play. And let me know if you think the Heat should have signed DeMarcus Cousins because I'm getting a ton of people saying that. But before we get out of here, I do want to shout out this very nice tweet that I got today. Absolutely made my day. It's not from my guy, Royal A. Shepherd. I can't stand that guy. Let's go ahead and zoom out a little bit. It's from my guy, Fame, a.k.a. You Famous Enough on Twitter, the GM of Heat Check Gaming. And he said, Anthony D. Heat, your editing is so underrated. I don't think Heat fans even realize some of the things you do in your videos. And I just want to say that I genuinely appreciate those kind words. Like, it means a lot. Like, I started doing this YouTube thing like 2.5 years ago with a 5 Below light and a USB mic I got from a 10-year-old Guitar Hero game. And now I'm here with, a slightly better setup, but it's still the best I can do shoved into the corner of my bedroom here. But I do just want to say that I greatly appreciate the words. Make sure y'all go follow my boy, You Famous Enough on Twitter. I'll have that link down below. And I just want to thank y'all for everything, like for real. So make sure to like and subscribe. It does help me out a lot. I got dreams of doing this content creation full time one day where I can get a studio with some nice softbox lights and everything. And I can't do that without y'all help. So again, the subscriptions and likes are greatly appreciated. That being said, I'll probably see y'all tomorrow after the Mavericks game with a post game. So tune in then.
Look, pull up in the city tryna get that dead face. Do it on my own, I don't need no dead weight. Had to kill him off, yeah, I need a head space. You know this homegrown bitch don't offend me.